In about 1992, I think, I worked for a company that did like licensing at the time for pretty much every single hair band in LA. It was pretty much on kind of like right on the cusp of the decline of hair bands in LA.
What do you mean licensing?
Licensing meaning did all the tour shirts and the shirts you see in like stores and things like that. All the thing in reality, the artwork that makes the bands the money. Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, Bon Jovi, believe it or not, being a big hair band. One of those bands at the time was LA Guns. When I called, I think it was Tracy Guns, and said, you know, what am I doing with this? Tracy said, Marc Rude is doing our artwork. My first reaction was, cool, I don't have to do the artwork. And two, the name sunk in that Marc Rude's doing it.
Right.
And I went, wait a minute. Marc Rude, I haven't heard that name since San Diego punk days. He's doing your guys' artwork. And he said, yeah. Here's his number, call him, tell him to come up. I looked at this as an opportunity to finally meet one of my art idols that I grew up with. I'd spent the last year having every big rock star come into my office and looking forward to it and going like, I'm going to meet this guy, I'm going to meet this guy. But I never had more butterflies in my stomach than meeting Marc Rude. And when Marc showed up, the secretary came into my office, walked in, and she said, there's a gentleman named Marc Rude here for you. I guess what I expected when I walked out in that lobby was a mirrored image of myself and what I always wanted to be. And what I always wanted to be was Marc Rude. Without ever knowing Marc, I always wanted to be Marc. When I saw Marc looked like somebody that I'd like passed by in Santa Monica and not given a fucking dollar to because he annoyed me. And I was disappointed by that, but that immediately went away when I started talking to him. And I walked back into my office with him, and we started talking about like the fact that he was doing artwork for LA Guns, and he was pretending that that was a cool thing, when I knew full and well with the repertoire that he's had that that's not a cool thing, that this was something that he was doing for money. And maybe he loved LA Guns and maybe he had like a connection with them. But this is a guy who did Battalion of Saints, Tex and the Horseheads, and the Misfits. And now he's doing artwork for LA Guns. And no offense to LA Guns, but there's a difference there. And it read as sad to me. And we talked about it and the concept. He showed me his portfolio, and unfortunately he didn't realize that I was already totally familiar with it. And unfortunately, at the time, I didn't get to tell him how much I really, like how much I grew up with his work and how much Wendy Pyro, like, force-fed his work to me and how much I just changed my whole direction because of him. And he walked out with this direction of doing LA Gun stuff. Marc left the office, and I felt I felt kind of disappointed. But I was more disappointed than anything else was the fact that this was a guy who really so fucking punk rock. And he was coming into my office and he was like slumping work for fucking LA Guns. And like I say, it's not anything against LA Guns. It's just the fact that like he was always on the fringe, and for some reason he was doing artwork for them. I found it like really depressing and sad because I really looked up to him so much. So a lot of other people that know him better might think it's kind of, typical Marc or something, but I didn't know him. I just looked up to him. And my experience was that sad. And when I got his artwork,
He did do it.
he did the work, and it wasn't typical Marc Rude. It was very, very dodgy at best.
And then me and Nikki ended up teaming up together in a band called LA Guns, which the intention was it was more of we wanted it to kind of be trash rock, kind of a punk version of the Rolling Stones. And Hannah Rocks was getting big at the time, so we were kind of shooting for that kind of rock and roll, making it more rock and roll rather than punk. And a lot of the people in the punk scene were kind of gradually gravitating towards rock, hard rock, Aerosmith and that kind of stuff. And then including Marc. Marc was the type of person that, if it's good music, it's good music. It didn't really matter it's like he loved punk rock, but it didn't have to be punk rock. It's like it was like if it was good, it was good, and he liked rock and roll too. He was familiar with me and Nikki from the punk scene, and from the Mau Mau's and from the Joneses. He was a fan of the Joneses.
Like, say for instance, the punk scene, and then you've got kind of like the second generation punk scene, like the cowpunk, like with, all the bands that kind of, the Horseheads, the Joneses, even though they weren't cowpunk, they were more that New York Dallsy thing, the Sirens, and there was a whole other wave of bands that were inspired by the punk bands, and then you had like the glam thing. All that stuff was a street thing, and because it was all, it was a scene. During those times, a lot of really talented people met other talented people and got really great bands together. Like I can still see the Horseheads and just think they're an amazing band. And a lot of really good music comes out of something that fresh. That's what happens, and that's what Marc was always searching for. And that's why he loved that whole LA Guns N' Roses. He loved Guns N' Roses. He would sing, I saw this band at the Troubadour and they were so fucking great, you gotta see them.